Hi there folks, I'm Alex Beds and today we're going to talk about AQUILA ukulele strings, or as I like to call them because I'm from the south of England, AQUILA. AQUILA ukulele strings are an Italian ukulele string that are made of various different materials, but most commonly a white material called Nylgut, which is a kind of shortened buzzword for nylon gut, a synthetic gut style string. So supposedly a traditional ukulele string. But they do and have expanded their horizons regularly and quite confusingly for some, and they now make strings that are nylon and a fluorocarbon-esque string, a completely unique string that's red that's very similar to their Nylgut string. Too many things to cover in a sentence or a paragraph, so we're going to run through the different types that they do. If you purchased a ukulele from new, the factory strings were most likely AQUILA. Less and less as time has gone on, more and more brands are adopting fluorocarbon strings, and AQUILA have tried to move with the times to keep up with that. But if your ukulele, your first instrument, or your ukulele currently has white strings on, then there's a 95% chance that those strings are AQUILA strings or AQUILA strings. Nylgut, which is the first material we're going to look at today. So Nylgut ukulele strings are a white string that has very, very little transparency, but just a tiny bit of transparency. And the traditional normal Nylgut strings that AQUILA produce are definitely the whitest of the strings that we'll see today. So these strings, I'll show you a good close-up now, but these strings are white with just a tiny amount of they are just a tiny bit translucent. You can just about, if you put them up to the light, you can see a shadow through them, but they are a pure white string and they are plastic. They are a nylon style string with a bit more resonance and a bit less stretch than a traditional nylon string, which does faithfully replicate gut strings. AQUILA make gut strings too, and I've had the opportunity to try them in the past, but they are far too expensive for me to put them in this video. And honestly, if you want my review of them, they're crap. They take a very, very long time to stretch in, and string technology has just come on leaps and bounds. Unless you're playing a lute or something very, very traditional kind of period-esque music, then I'd see no need for the gut strings. These actually do the finest job of replicating them along with clear nylon. But Nylgut has a kind of small amount of stretch, but for the most part it retains its shape very quickly. So AQUILA themselves like to market this string as being superior to nylon and fluorocarbon, or as they call it, carbon strings, because the string itself is slightly fatter, it's a bit more rigid, it's got a bit more projection. In fact, just showing you the back of the packet and giving it a read now, the new Nylgut is the first product developed and patented by AQUILA. It's neither common nylon nor carbon, nor a mix of them. It's a plastic compound of 3 different components. Compared to nylon, new Nylgut produces a better sound and stays in tune longer. Due to its higher density, similar to that of pure gut, new Nylgut produces a better sound than nylon and is not so metallic. See, I'm going to stop reading it there because it says to me that AQUILA are sick of telling people that their strings are fantastic, and they are kind of arguing the case for their string on the packet, which is a strange thing to do. And I'm not judging them for it, but yeah, Nylgut strings are very good at tightening up cheaper instruments. So if you've got a very cheap instrument with poor intonation, by putting this slightly higher density string on and pulling the neck up slightly, you're kind of using this to cheat having to set the instrument up properly. And that's why it's so popular with high production Chinese, Indonesian factories. There's nothing wrong with Nylgut, but I find that Nylgut has a tendency to make all instruments sound a bit like they have AQUILA strings on them. So it's got a very distinctive sound that transcends whether you're using a cheap laminate or plastic ukulele or all the way up to something that's all solid wood. But in the meantime, this is Nylgut. They come in a pack of 4, tightly coiled like this. If you have a wound string, the wound string will come shrink wrapped. Just a very good, reliable string the kind of string that if you want a like-for-like replacement for what's on your beginner's instrument now, this is the string that you should be looking at. So yeah, that's new Nylgut. Okay, and the second string we'll look at today is the AQUILA Lava series strings. Now the AQUILA Lava series strings share 99% of their technology and tone and feel and sound and texture with the Nylgut strings, but these have been dyed a charcoal grey / light black colour. So if I open this packet now for you to see, this set of strings are tonally the same. They were created, I think, just because a lot of people don't like the white strings on the AQUILAs, and after a long time they had become associated with being slightly kind of cheaper ukulele string. The Lava strings do all, as of late 2019 batches, come individually wrapped, which is interesting for a longer life. And they are a string that if you hold up into the light, they are a light grey colour, but if you look at them from a distance, they are a dark grey to sometimes a black colour on the very thin strings. There's nothing more really to say about Lava series strings, but we will do a side-by-side comparison for you now. Okay, and now we're going to move on to something that really divides opinion. This is the AQUILA Red Series ukulele strings. Now, the Red Series ukulele strings are divisive because when they first launched, they used to break all the time. Whether they were a product that was brought into the market too soon, or whether the kind of slightly unique quirk about how they are manufactured, that we're going to get onto in a second, kind of forces some players and how they play and their technique to snap them more regularly. I don't know. As of 2020, when I filmed this, I would say that for every 20 sets that we sell over at the Southern Ukulele Store, maybe one person will say, oh, a string broke when I was fitting them. What makes these Red Series strings so different to everything else out on the market is that the kind of crazy mad genius that runs AQUILA, he's very known for tinkering and never kind of settling down on one formulation. And he was looking for a string that could produce lower, deeper notes with a bit more thickness and depth without changing the diameter of the string. And the result was the Red Series. So the theory behind these strings is that for the first time, ukulele players were able to have a kind of darker, deeper sound without needing to do a lot of work on the nut or maybe the bridge slots. And that's not something that many people use when they are trying to kind of talk about the Red Series strings as a reason for why they snap. But I think it makes sense. What the science behind these strings, as written on the back of this packet, which I'll focus on for you now, is trying to say is that the strings themselves are capable of lower tunings and kind of different vibrations and a different feel to everything else out there, but not not while being the conventional thickness like on a nylon string. And I think it's one of those strings that works for some people and doesn't work for others. My advice to you is try the Aquila Reds once, and if you love them, keep buying them. And if you try them once and when you're tuning them up on your favourite ukulele, one of them snaps, just write these strings off and don't try them again. The initial bugs or the initial kind of failure rate of these strings is definitely much it was much higher than it is now, but the Aquila Red strings just remain so divisive to the point where actually I found myself kind of apologising for them when I was writing listings for the Southern Ukulele Store. I was like, the Aquila Red strings sound great at this and great at that, but they do sometimes snap, so please be careful with it. You know, it's one of those things you can't win. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. And they continue to be one of the more popular Aquila strings, despite being a bit Marmite, as we say in the UK. Going really deep down the rabbit hole now, there is a good piece of advice I can give you about these strings that you may not have seen or heard elsewhere, and that is that in the last 2 years the sets have changed quite a bit. So if you're finding somebody selling them online, it might be worth just giving them a ring and getting them to open up a set before you purchase them. That might sound crazy, but Aquila have changed things a few times. If you were to buy, this is a tenor high G set and an 87U set, you'll be fine. It'll be consistent. All of the strings will be red and unwound. But on more recent sets, so 88U, the tenor low G set, you might find that when you open the pack, some strings are, the low G string is unwound. Sometimes it's a wound string that has been dyed red, and obviously you're going to have a preference. Some people prefer wound strings, some people prefer unwound. So just be a bit careful when purchasing the red strings to make sure that you know what you are getting if you're fussy or you have particular needs or tastes, because the dealer isn't going to know without opening the pack. So don't be too hard on them. It's impossible for us to keep up as well. As somebody who works in a ukulele shop, I do check every delivery, but sometimes the same batches can have slightly different things going on. Anyway, Aquila Reds, let's give them a play. Okay, so earlier on I talked about Kanile'a and the string that they used to replace the standard Nylgut strings, and that string is the Super Nylgut string. The Super Nylgut string has a slightly more satin, lived-in feel to it than the normal Nylgut strings. Normal Nylgut strings can feel a tiny bit glossy. The Super Nylgut strings, by comparison, feel a bit, I want to say satin, but the answer is kind of smooth. If you run your finger up the fingerboard, the string doesn't kind of get stuck quite as easily, and that translates really well into how these strings intonate and how they perform. They have the same tension as a normal Nylgut string, but they have a kind of almost like a slippery feel to them, in the same way that some fluorocarbon strings have. And for me, Super Nylgut strings are the way to go. And if you're buying sort of solid wood instruments by Kala or Ohana, or some Lanakai or Breedlove or Eastman, I mean the list goes on and on and on and on, then it's Super Nylgut strings that they are using nowadays. These are the strings that Aquila are exporting out to factories in the Far East to put on decent ukuleles. Some of the cheaper ones will still have that yellow Nylgut string, but actually if you're looking for bog standard normal AQUILA strings. The Super Nylgut strings are the most popular now. The Nylgut string is the most well known. The Super Nylgut are the most popular. So we're going to give these a play and see what you guys think. See whether they are really that super compared to normal Nylgut. Okay, so now we're on to our penultimate string of the AQUILA string video, and this is the sugar strings. The sugar strings caused a massive splash when they were released, I think in 2016. We sold hundreds and hundreds of sets, and the overwhelming review is that yes, AQUILA can make a fluorocarbon style string. It had some unique quirks that are not so common on modern ones, I found, having demoed a set of these for this video. So the sugar strings aren't technically fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon is like a kind of formulation, and the sugar string is a bioplastic derived from sugarcane, but it does feel and perform very, very similar to a fluorocarbon string. I find the sugar strings are just slightly thinner than many fluorocarbon strings out there, whereas all of the other AQUILA strings we've talked about today are slightly fatter than fluorocarbon strings. The sugar strings are very, very good if you're a strummer who wants a clear, slightly crisper sound, and they are a particularly good string for not stretching too much. You know, once you get these up to pitch, they tend to settle a bit quicker than some of the fluorocarbon strings, Nylgut strings, etc., etc. You know what I mean. Yeah, the sugar string is AQUILA's answer to fluorocarbon, and you might be saying, well, if these Nylgut strings are so good, as AQUILA like to say on the packet, why did they make a fluorocarbon string? And that's a fantastic question. Fluorocarbon strings are becoming kind of more in vogue. People know now through years and years of people on the internet like myself talking about these strings and these types of materials and ukuleles that fluorocarbon is a much more transparent sounding string. If you have a decent or a very good quality solid wood instrument, fluorocarbon will give you more than a Nylgut string. That's just my opinion, but you can ask 100 ukulele players and 95 of them will agree with me. No doubt though, the 5 people that comment on this video when they find it will be the 5 that just love Nylgut strings. But fluorocarbon is the future of the ukulele. It's the present of the ukulele, and the sugar strings are AQUILA's answer. When they first came out, we sold hundreds and hundreds of sets, and although that's slowed down now, the people that have tried them tend to like them and stick with them. There is a kind of a vocal minority of people that found that these strings squeak, and I find that they squeak the first few days that you put them on, but otherwise they're fine. They settle in. I think when they're produced, that sugar cane, there might be some kind of natural lubricant produced that if you kind of rub your finger up the string you feel, but after a while that disappears, and what you're left with is a slightly lighter tension a slightly lighter thickness but normal tension fluorocarbon string, which is ideal for most players out there that don't like when their fingers hurt after playing for hours. So the sugar strings are great. You should all definitely give them a try. We're going to give them a try now and see what you think. Take one. The final string we're going to look at today is something completely unique, something that you might not even be able to find in your territory. This is the AQUILA AGxAQ strings, and they were designed with ALDRINE, the very famous, very talented songwriter, performer and administrator of Ukulele Underground. Really cool guy, met him a few times, really lovely player. Although when I met him, the last 2 times I've met him, he hasn't been using these strings, but maybe they're produced for kind of his recordings, you know, who am I to say. But the ALDRINE strings are advertised as being a collaboration formed over 3 years of friendship between ALDRINE and AQUILA. And these strings are a nylon string, a green nylon string, kind of, I want to say like a seafoam green coloured string. So you fans out there of the kind of Fender ukuleles of this world, you know, you will like these strings, and they're individually wrapped, but they are a really cool translucent green colour and they sound really good. These strings, I kind of secretly used these strings for a while, but I didn't tell people how much I like them because I felt like I must have been the only person in the world that had ever bought them. When they first came out, a few people did buy them, but over here in the UK, ALDRINE isn't really the household ukulele name that he is worldwide. But I really recommend these strings. Because they're nylon, it's definitely worth just kind of taking a look at the gauge chart, because nylon strings will stretch slightly when you put them on. They take longer to bed in, but they are extremely traditional and warm sounding. And although these are clearly a kind of dyed green nylon type of string, they sound slightly more like titanium strings, the D'Addario titanium strings, a kind of hard tension nylon string. So if you're an expressive player, a finger picker, these are really, really good. I really recommend checking them out. We're going to give them a play, and I hope you like them too. Hey folks, so we've really tried to cover AQUILA strings, the popular strings and what's available in 2020. It's also worth mentioning that AQUILA make a bio nylon string, which is a cheaper string, which is something that we don't sell in the UK and not something I have a great deal of familiarity with. I've tried them a few times. I found them to be very, very flat sounding, like a clear nylon kind of cheaper string, and AQUILA don't really push these or talk about these strings very often. It's quite likely they've been discontinued. And the other kind of string that has been discontinued that AQUILA used to make is carbon black strings, which can still be purchased under the Martin ukulele string banner. The codes for those are M605, M610 and M625. They are a darker version of the sugar strings, or kind of like a dark fluorocarbon string. Very mellow, very similar to kind of Worth Browns and Fremonts and Nui Blackwater strings. But they didn't sell that well, and they didn't last very long before Martin decided that that was a string that they wanted kind of in their catalogue, and AQUILA and Martin have collaborated on that, and we'll talk about that in another video. Please subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends. If anyone out there, you know, wants to listen to a kind of long 20-minute boring video about ukulele strings, then I am your guy. In the meantime, though, you know, leave a comment, like the video, and I will be back very, very soon.